All right, good evening. I want to welcome you all to my second of 4 college student panel evenings. I have a great group of panelists this evening, and I'm anxious to get started introducing them. And I think you're going to be really find that this is going to be a very informative and enjoyable session. These are 5 fabulous students who are anxious to talk about their schools and have been very generous with their time in sharing their knowledge and experiences. I have students from, in alphabetical order, Brown, Case, Western, Duke, Northwestern, and Swarthmore. Before we get started, I just want to say a few things. We are recording this session this evening. I also, before I introduce the panelists, I want to point out that we have a Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So if you would like to ask a question, please type it in there and I will try to leave time. But I have a lot of questions to get through that I've already put together for these panelists. So hopefully your question will be answered. I'm going to start with my introductions. I'll start with, I'm going in year order. So I'm going to start with you, Anya. Anya is about to enter her senior year at Northwestern University. And then Thomas, Anya Kotari, I'm sorry, I didn't want to get her full name in there. Thomas Dalick is entering his senior year at Swarthmore College. And then I have Callie Zola, who is a rising junior at Brown University. John Gross, who is also a rising junior, he is at Duke University. And Andy Chakraborty is a rising sophomore at Case Western. So I will start the questions. I'm going to actually start with the admissions process because you know, all of you have gone through this, and as you know, the students who are listening in, many of them will not have a chance to visit colleges. So maybe you can share a bit about what was especially helpful to you when you were going through the college decision process. I am going to start with you, Thomas.
Okay, well, I think first off, I'm Thomas. I go to Swarthmore. Like we've already mentioned, I'm a math and linguistics double major. So kind of reflecting that liberal arts distribution, which is what I was interested in when I was looking at schools. I looked at all liberal arts precisely because I wanted that kind of opportunity to explore broad interests. And I think that in terms of when I was considering what schools to apply to, I would say that the biggest part of my decision had to do with the community, right? Like I looked at a lot of liberal arts schools that were all going to be really great places to learn. And I wanted to pick one that was going to be the right place to live. So I spent a lot of time trying to meet current students and going to events. And I think that's really important.
Great. Anya, what would you have to add to that?
What was the question again?
The question, this is about your college. I wanted to say, in Anya's defense, poor Anya almost didn't make it tonight because she had a really bad headache. So I'm really happy to have you here and I'm happy to repeat the question. In your process, the things that were especially helpful, when talking earlier, you had said something about looking at the courses and figuring out.
Yeah, so I knew what I wanted to major in. I knew it was industrial engineering all the way for me. So I was kind of just looking at schools by degree and looking at a place that had a strong industrial engineering program, but also I was like getting into the nitty gritty of like looking at all of the courses and like all of the areas of specialization that a school offered. So I was like really getting into it, and that definitely helped me in my search. But also I would say in terms of like identifying a place, it's like Thomas was saying, it's a lot about where you see yourself living and not just learning. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I know for my college search, like I'm a civil engineering major, but also on the side, I also played bass and viola. So like I wanted to find a school that would offer STEM classes, very much STEM and engineering, but also had that kind of range that could offer music and arts as well. So that's really what I kind of went into my college search looking for.
Great. You know what? I'm going to actually now back up, and I had made the introductions, but I'm going to let each of you go and talk about your major and maybe mention something about the other things that you're involved in on campus. So, Andy, why don't I start with you because you just told us your major.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a civil engineering major with a public policy minor, and just on campus, I'm in the orchestra, and I'm part of a group called HDC, which is Humanitarian Design Corps, and I work with the local farm in designing solar panel operated fans to cool the greenhouses. So that was kind of like our big project this year. And then just like on the side, I also have a radio show on campus. So just as a fun little, relaxing thing.
Great, thank you. John, why don't you tell us about your major and the things that you do on campus?
Yeah, so I'm a mechanical engineering major at Duke within the Pratt School of Engineering, an environmental science and policy minor. And outside of classes, I'm in part of club baseball and part of motorsports and also part of an introductory software club. So a little all over the map, but a lot of little things that make it fun.
Thanks. Anya.
Hi, yeah. I'm an industrial engineering and management sciences major at Northwestern. And outside of class, I'm involved in the startup community here at Northwestern. I actually just recently left the startup I've been working on for about a year. And besides that, I'm also very involved in the industrial engineering department. I'm the president of the Industrial Engineering Student Advisory Board, and I'm also in a sorority.
Thank you. Thomas?
So I mentioned
major, but tell us about the things you're involved in.
Yeah, my biggest commitment outside of academics is I'm an RA, so I'm part of the couple committees related to that, and I do a lot of work engineering sort of community activities and working on developing stuff like what do we do with the first years, right? How do we engage freshmen, especially in this particular environment. And then in addition to that, I kind of fill my free time with fun little stuff. So I'm president of the kickboxing club. Spend a lot of time at yoga classes, which we offer for free. Look at that. Like, I think that goes back to the point. You're going to live here. So look at what there is besides classes.
Thanks. And last but not least, Callie.
Hi. So I'm an English major at Brown, and outside of class, I'm involved in Club Ultimate Frisbee, and I'm a member of the Ivy Film Festival, which is a student-run film festival organization. And I'm also part of Project Sunshine, which is a volunteer group that goes to the local pediatric hospital and sort of does like arts and crafts with the inpatients there. I do a little bit of student theater, and I'm also in a sorority.
Great. I was waiting to hear about the theater. That was a big part of undergraduate for you too. And I want you to say also, this is pure accident that I have all these engineering students, only one who is the pure arts, although we do have our linguistic student here as well. So, so back to thinking back to your application process, what might be something in hindsight that you might have done differently, or just, something else that you probably think you would have been helpful to do? Andy, I think you had an answer for this.
Yeah, I definitely think, my list of colleges, I think, as you remember, were kind of all over the place. So like, just going back, I kind of wish that I narrowed it down a little bit more and kind of focused on what I really wanted, which was like a more STEM kind of oriented place, but that had on the side, more, extracurriculars to do. So I kind of just went all over the place, which I, wish I was a little more organized, but.
But when you did settle on one, you settled.
That's true. That's true. When I decided I wanted to go to Case, I did ED, which was good, but the process to getting there was a little windy. Yeah.
Okay, you learned something about yourself. In your experiences at your college, is there something that surprised you? You did your research, you had certain preconceptions going in. Anybody who wants to answer this question? Somebody wants to answer this question. Callie.
Okay, so something about the school, I mean, Brown is sort of their big thing is the open curriculum where they don't have any requirements. And obviously I knew about that going in, but it was always sort of something where I couldn't decide if I really wanted that or not, because the two schools I ended up deciding between, one had an extremely rigid curriculum and the other one was Brown, which had like nothing. So I was like waffling even towards the end about if I really wanted that. And then when I got there, you know, obviously I realized, yes, I do want that, but also that it's very open. Like they don't, I mean, like they're not lying when they say you're on your own kind of. And obviously there's advisors and, you know, academic support and student advisors too, but, you know, ultimately all of your class choices and everything that you do, unless you're, you know, pre-med pretty much, is up to you. So I feel like that was something like I understood, but I don't know that I really understood the full extent of it until I got there, until I actually experienced it. And I would say another thing is that I didn't really, I mean, I realized, but I didn't really realize that, you know, Brown has its own campus and it has, you know, green space and it has sort of enclosed dorms, but it's also really, really close to Providence. So it has a lot of the city aspect that, you know, it's not entirely enclosed. So I thought that was interesting because it sort of has a good mix of both.
Okay, thanks. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that I'm not sure if surprises or it's sort of a similar, I knew it, but I didn't quite get what I knew, in the sense that I think when I went to campus, or like when I was about to arrive on campus, I expected like this very intellectual environment, which I'm not going to lie, we're pretty academically focused as an institution, right? And the people are similar. But I think that was interesting that I never really saw in high school was that everyone who I go to school with has very different ways of being academic, right? And I think that was something that honestly made it was a really pleasant surprise, right? It was, instead of arriving and having everyone be constantly studying, I think people took that sort of intellectual attitude and brought it to everything that they did, from classes to clubs to anything, right? In really interesting ways. And I think it made for a much broader experience than I was expecting. You know, like I expected to sort of be a similar person to who I was in high school in a lot of senses. And instead being in a community that was similar to me, but different in all these different ways has made for a lot of changes on my part, right? That have been really awesome.
Good. Let's talk about classes. All but one of you attend a mid-sized school. Anya, yours is pushing to larger, but I still consider Northwestern a mid-sized school. I'm going to start with you, John. If you can talk a little bit about your academic experience, your classes, the size, and as you're moving up in, you know, from freshman up now to junior year, how have you seen the class size and experience change?
Yeah, so that ties into one of the things that surprised me is that it got very small very quickly. So within Duke, I'm in Pratt, which is a separate school within. There's about 300 engineers in total in my class of 2022. And then now that I've gotten through a lot of the general engineering requirements, now I'm in mostly specifically mechanical engineering requirements. And there's only about 70 kids now who are in all of my classes. And it's a pretty rigid curriculum. I don't have very many choices. The classes are chosen for me, probably 3 or 4 most semesters, 4 out of the 4 for some of the ones I've had. But it was very surprising because now there's really 70 kids who I see throughout the entire day, every day. And so I originally wanted to go to a smaller school, and then I think I slowly crept up in size. And even Duke, which is at 7,000, feels very small now. I really only see 70 kids every day. The largest classes I was in were about 200, general physics and math classes. But they broke down really well into groups of about 20 to 30. It became very personal and much more intimate than I was expecting in most of my classes.
I do want to ask you just before I turn to the others, as an engineering student, what are your requirements outside the engineering school?
So I only have 5 classes that I need to take outside of the engineering school, 2 of which can be replaced by APs. So I really only need 3 outside classes, which can be anything. But there aren't that many more open slots in all of my 4 years. So I really only have 5 open slots to choose from. So it's pretty rigid. Definitely a surprise.
So that's interesting. Okay. Who wants to go next? I'm going to turn to Callie next.
Yeah, so my classes, especially because I'm not a STEM major, so I don't have a ton of major requirements that are, like, I don't have a lot of prerequisite requirements. So I have a lot of friends that are in, 500 person classes, and then as they get older, they'll be in smaller ones. But for me, it's mostly been kind of just what I want to take. And so I've been in a class that had 9 people, and then in the same semester I was in a class with 200 people. So it's been kind of a mix for me in terms of the amount of people. But then, sort of like John was saying, when you're in a big class, there's always been sections, throughout the week. So you're down to like 20 people. So that sort of made it smaller too. So I feel like there's a good balance between if you want to take all lecture classes, or if you want to take really small seminars. I feel like I've gotten to take, a solid mix of both of those.
Okay, thank you. Anya, tell us about your classes, size, experiences.
Yeah, so of course, like freshman year intro classes were going to be big. Even I think the engineering school at Northwestern is the second biggest school here. The College of Arts and Sciences is the biggest. So we all have like the intro engineering curriculum, and those were maybe like 80-person lectures. But throughout the year, you get to know a lot of them. You have like your core group of friends. And you're all just like getting through the class together. And then within my major, sort of contrasting to John, I had a lot more flexibility. I had like, of course, my core IE classes that I had to take, but I had a lot more flexibility with IE electives. But I still saw a lot of the same people, and like there's definitely like my little like IE squad that I have. That we all just like happen to be in like 3 or 4 of the same classes together every quarter. So I think there are like about 100 IEs at Northwestern, but it still feels a lot smaller than that because like I see a lot of the same people. So it's big, and like sometimes when I take when I have distribution requirements in another school, like I will not recognize anyone. Even like walking to a different part of campus, like while I'm walking on a different part of campus, I won't recognize anyone. So yeah, it's kind of like you get both sides of it.
I'm going to come back to that in a later question when we talk more about the social aspect of college. But I want you all to be thinking about, not so much you, Thomas, because you go to a school of 1,600 people, but if your friends, where your pockets of friends are, if you find that they're mostly in your major, if you're at a school that has a separate engineering school or, whatever it might be. But as I said, I want to come back to that. Andy, tell us a little about your classes.
Yeah, so I just finished my first year at Case, and I mean, Case Western is very heavily engineering and STEM. So like half of the people there are like engineering majors. So for those kind of, prereqs and requirements, I think my math lecture was like 400 people. But then in contrast, everyone's required to take like a certain amount of freshman seminar, like writing seminars, and those are maximum 17 people. So they range from, those two big sizes, but then again, as everyone else has said, as you get kind of deeper into your major, the number dwindles. Like next semester, I have a class with only 20 students already. So yeah, and then as for the electives, there's a little bit of flexibility. I would say it's probably in between, Northwestern and Duke. Like each year you have to take a breadth elective, which is basically a class from any of the other schools within case. So like the management school, the business school, stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty open, but to an extent. Yeah.
Okay. Thomas, I was going to ask you about yours, but I think you pretty much covered it in the last question that you answered. I'm going to just continue with the academics just for a moment. I want to hear how all of you are or have been taking advantage of the academic advising at your school. And I want to hear from any of you who have taken advantage of the career services. Who would like to start?
I have so many advisors.
Okay, then you're starting.
Yeah, I think I have 6 advisors right now. They're all lovely. They actually are. And I think some part of that experience is because it's a small school. But I think another part of it is about sort of, I've found that everyone who I've ever reached out to with a question has been lovely and extraordinarily helpful. And I don't think that has to do with school size, right? Like if you send somebody an email because you have a question and you're polite about it, you get a response. And I've picked up like unofficial DL advisors exactly like that. And I find that I, for one, have benefited a lot, not so much in terms of like, they don't tell me what to do, but to have an ear that I can just talk to somebody about, oh, well, I'm considering taking this class next semester, but I don't really know. So I think really it's been lovely to have sort of this more personal connection to the department. And I get lucky because I'm a small school. I actually get to see a lot of my advisors in non-academic contexts too. Like one of my secret math advisors, not my official one, my secret one, comes to Zumba with me every Wednesday. So I get to like dance with her for like an hour and have a lovely time. And it's stuff like that that I really think makes the difference in terms of like personal connection.
Okay. Callie, so you have virtually no academic requirements other than within your major concentration.
Yeah.
How have you used academic advising?
So every first year gets assigned an academic advisor, I'm pretty sure based on the major that you apply with or, an adjacent major. And so I got an English professor as my advisor, which worked out. And I know that I personally had a really great experience with her, and we were just emailing the other day. So she's been very helpful to me and sort of just like trying to give me some semblance of an idea of what I could do in English. And so I really liked her. And then when you declare your major, you get a new academic advisor, a major advisor. And then if you do a thesis or a capstone, then you get another advisor. But I haven't met my new advisor yet because I declared my major, at home this past spring. So we'll see. And then you have student advisors too your first year, and you can opt in to have another one your sophomore year. And I also personally really liked mine. She was really nice, and that was I really liked that option because it was, more of an informal gathering. That's the wrong word, but it was a more informal way of getting information about the school and how to navigate it. Yeah.
Anybody else have a student advisor?
Yeah, I do. It was like I met him, or we like started corresponding like before I got to campus. Like he's my peer advisor. Everyone at Northwestern gets a peer advisor like in your school. So we have like the engineering school, College of Arts and Sciences, all that. And then also about my academic advisor, I'm not a fan, but like I love my department and I love the faculty, and like I can literally just go to anyone and just ask for advice on what classes I'm going to take. But I find that the people who've given me the best advice are upperclassmen. So getting involved in something, in like maybe taking like a class typically taken by sophomores your freshman year, and making some like sophomore friends or like junior or senior friends is super helpful, because they will like give you their 4-year plan and like let you know like, hey, maybe you should take this next quarter, or like don't take that because the professor sucks. So I think like, yeah, like academic advising is necessary to some extent, but like your peers are really going to be probably your best point of contact for that.
Okay. I guess John and Andy. John, why'd you go?
I actually was a student faculty first year advisory counselor is what they were called. And I was paired with 8 to 10 students. And I think that program is wonderful. I loved being one. I was really helped out by mine when I was a freshman. And I think the really strong point of Duke, they're doing a program this year virtually where they're pairing individual students one-to-one and setting up online sessions for freshmen. So they really focus on that, which is phenomenal. In terms of my general academic advising, I have 2 advisors, one of which helps me with general things like what am I inspired by, what direction do I want to go in with my life, and the other one who helps me with my specific classes, like helps me the numbers and which one comes before the other one. And they're actually married, which is interesting. But it's a really great pair to have one more abstract and one much more concrete. But I found that what Duke does really well is the professors are so open to helping individual students, and they give some great advice. They're always available after class. You could make an appointment with them day or the next, and I've gotten some great, very personal advice from almost all my professors.
Great. Andy, what do you want to add about advising as a first-year student?
Yeah, well, very similar to what John said. I have 2 advisors, one that kind of deals with more abstract concepts. Like I remember the first week of school, she had us like all go to her office and draw a picture of ourselves doing, you know, what we want our graduation goal to be, you know. And then we have a academic advisor, which your first year, your academic advisor is, I mentioned earlier, you have to take a freshman writing course. Your academic advisor is your professor for that course, and then it doesn't change until you declare your major. Then you get an academic advisor within your major. So my academic advisor actually just changed because I declared my major a few weeks ago. So I haven't really gotten to meet mine yet, but you know, he is kind of more, you know, helps with classes and, you know, which would be more beneficial if I take which year. And then the second advisor is called your navigator, who deals with the more abstract, but they also do a little bit of lobbying for you. So like, for example, before, you know, the pandemic hit, I like broke my elbow right before midterms. And she was the one that like went to all of my professors and said, yeah, she's in the hospital. So like, can you maybe do like a makeup for her? So if you ever need to like, you know, someone to like advocate for you, you go to your navigator.
Wow, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say something. I think maybe a really great point that everybody is sort of illustrated here is that like you're going to have probably more than one advisor. So also keep in mind different advisors are really great for different things, right? And wherever you end up, make sure you have in like your list right next to you have like this person is my advisor, this is what they're great for. So like maybe that's your advisor. So like one of my advisors is a dean. So she's the one I would go to if I had something like that where I wanted to like a midterm delayed. But also like some advisors are going to be great at sort of like the spiritual guidance of like, where do you want to end up? But also keep in mind, like there's value to advisors who can just sort of like forward your email to someone important, right? Like just pay attention to what they're doing for you and what they're great at.
Okay. Has anyone taken advantage of career services?
Yeah, extensively, because
Okay.
I was a terrible interviewer. So I did a ton of mock interviews with career services, and yeah, I've been going to them since like freshman year, like maybe once or twice a year. At first for like, we don't have like set career advisors. You kind of just like, depending on what you go in for, you see someone different. So if you're like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life, you see someone different than if you like sort of know what you want to do with your life. So yeah, career
Easy to get
advisors.
an appointment.
Yeah, super easy to get appointments. Also at Northwestern, we have a separate career career advising department specifically for engineers. So I've used both engineering career development and Northwestern career advancement. Yeah, I talk to both of them depending on like what I need to get done.
Okay. All right. I'm going to switch to what is sometimes a sensitive topic, mental health. I would say it's an increasingly relevant topic on college campuses. And I'm going to stick with you, Anya, for the moment. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how Northwestern is about identifying a need to, whether it's build their department, reduce any stigma associated with taking advantage of mental health resources.
Yeah, so I guess a little background is like personally I've dealt with anxiety and depression going back to high school. So like going to college, I was always concerned about how I was gonna like transition. And I ended up finding the Northwestern Accessibility Office, which is called Accessible NU, and they've been like super helpful. So I think most schools have something like this. You sort of register with them and they like have your disability on file, and then your disability or like mental health issue on file, and they help you if a professor is like being a little difficult. But I would say that the really interesting and surprising thing about Northwestern is that I found is how open professors are about mental health. Like I've had a ton of classes that have started like first lecture, like, hey, if you're struggling with mental health, like that's just as valid as struggling with like physical health. So please feel free to email me. And this is like engineering professors or humanities professors or whatever. And I also think the general vibe at Northwestern is there's very little stigma around mental health. And I think that's a general trend in like the US right now. Like there's less, especially with our generation, there's less stigma around mental health. But yeah, I think in terms of institutional offerings for students with mental health issues, Northwestern has been pretty solid.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's turn to a lighter subject, social scene. So I'm going to hear from all of you, and maybe we can also weave in several of you are members of Greek. So who wants to start? Talk about, I mean, things like the life of the social life of the college. Does it take place on campus? Is it, you know, in the surrounding city or town? What do students do on weekends? Is it mostly during the weekend, or is the social life happening throughout the semester and during the week? Callie, why don't you start?
Okay. I would say that mostly the social life is concentrated on campus. There's definitely like, you know, clubs will host parties at off-campus locations, but for the most part, it's like if you're walking around campus on the weekend, you'll probably just stumble into something, you know, a block away from your dorm. And I would say, I mean, it's mostly a weekend thing, maybe like end of the week weekend thing, and then I would say it dies down around like midterms and finals. But I mean, I'm sure that's true of most places. And yeah, I would say thinking about like who hosts the parties and that sort of thing, usually it's the frats or it's a sports team or it's just like a club. Clubs will usually just do sponsored parties and that sort of thing. And a lot of times just thinking more generally about, where I've made my friends and who I hang out with, a lot of times it's people who I've met through clubs and that sort of thing, much more so than my classes. And that's probably because I'm not really in a major that's that's really connected, because there's so many different routes you can take with it. So I've mostly found friends through clubs and through where I'm living in my dorm and that sort of thing. And so thinking about parties, it's more like dorm parties rather than going out, into the city, but that's obviously still an option because we're so close. So yeah.
I want to ask you, because since it's really part of the social life, your decision to join a sorority. I don't typically think of Brown as a school that's big on Greek life.
Yeah, and you can attest to this, that I was literally looking at schools based on who didn't have a strong Greek life, because I was so against it. And I think what I like about it is, and obviously, there's a stigma around Greek life because, I think part of why I was really hesitant is because they're very historically exclusionary institutions, and obviously Brown is not exempt from that. But I think what I like about it is that, it's definitely still present, and the dorms that they're in are kind of right in the middle of campus, and chances are you're going to know someone who's in a sorority or fraternity, but they're still a pretty small part of the social life and just your general life. So it's like most people who are in the sorority are like, it's not their entire social life, where it's one social outlet and you can put as much into it as you want to get out of it, but it's usually like, this is one thing out of many other activities that I'm part of, or many other organizations that I'm part of, and that sort of thing, which I really like. So it feels much more like it's not isolated. It's not like because you're in Greek life, you can only hang out with Greek life, or because I'm not in Greek life, I don't want to hang out with people, that sort of thing. It's like I have friends in Greek life, I have friends who are not, and we all go to the same parties. So.
Good. John, I'm going to turn to you next, and I also want you to address the social scene being in the engineering school and whether your friends are primarily in engineering.
Right. So I would say pretty contrasting experience in Cali. I would say Greek life, my social life is defined by Greek life. And it's a bit, there's fractions, like my fraternity, I really only hang out with people in my fraternity. And I have fewer engineering friends than I would like to have, because there's not a lot of engineering in Greek life. An interesting thing about Duke is that it's 3 years on campus. You have to live 3 years on campus. So the social life is actually off campus and senior housing. And there's not really a big town in Durham, not a big party town, not really a big city. So it's really local houses that seniors rent off campus, where things are primarily had at. But yeah, Greek life is definitely my life. My social life is defined by Greek life. And I think a lot of Duke students feel similar. And there's bad parts about that, because in some ways I feel trapped to hang out with my fraternity, but in other ways I've really bonded with the 30 kids in my class. So you get a really deep connection with the people, however you're kind of focused in that small group. So positives and negatives to that.
Are the Greek parties open?
Not really, no. It's once you join one fraternity, it's unfortunate. You kind of lose touch with people who joined other fraternities. Yeah.
Thomas, why don't you, I know you can spend 2 seconds talking about Greek life at Swarthmore.
To boomerang in the other direction, we abolished our frats last year. Got a little frisky there in the middle, but I think it was interesting. I think it's actually an interesting lesson, because people were a little worried at first. I mean, they wanted the frats gone, but they were worried what would happen to the social life. And I think what's been really interesting is all of our parties have become hosted by student clubs. And it's actually a lot more fun because I like comparing like events that I went to before and after. Now suddenly every party is sort of like a different theme. There's different music, there's different decorations, there's different everything. So I think in that sense, don't worry that a lack of Greek life corresponds to a lack of party life, because certainly like we have a whole wide range of events. And I mean, like, some of it is really hella weird. Like, one of my friends hosted an event where you went and watched the Lorax while playing with slime, because that's the type of events. So we just throw funding at students to organize events on weekends. So if you have a plan, you can get $200 to do it. And I think that means that I have never found a weekend where I don't have something to do. And so it's like, to give a sense of what my general weekend looks like, I wake up on Saturday. I'm a morning person, so I'm up at like 7, and I work for a couple hours because, truth be told, you're going to be working on the weekend, right? But that doesn't mean you can't have fun. And then I think most students will do sort of club activities. So Saturday is when my kickboxing club meets. And then after that, those evenings are open events to the whole campus. And Sundays we have dorm events. So every Sunday your floor will have some sort of something going on. It could be like ice cream shakes. We have a smoothie bike where you come in and you like pedal and you make your own smoothies, and stuff like that will happen sort of everywhere.
Okay. Anya, same question. Greek life, but also your social circle. It sounds like most of your friends are engineering students.
Well, I would say I have a good group in the engineering department, and then I have a good group in my sorority. And then there's also some overlap between that. So yeah, I never thought I would join Greek life, but I don't know. I just like, there was like a rush sign up event and I was just walking by and I was like, why the hell not? And then I did it and I loved my friends in my sorority. I really enjoyed the experience. But I think that there are definitely people who aren't affiliated with any Greek organization who have been to way more Greek events than I have, because you can always like tag along or bring a friend. There are like date nights where you can like have +1s or like +2s. So yeah, there are some like non-Greeks who will go to like every single one of those, and I'm not a huge party person, so I usually like sit those out and like enjoy alternative entertainment. So I think Greek life at Northwestern is kind of just what you make of it. I think that's mostly true everywhere. But I guess something interesting about it is it's somewhat cyclical. So in the fall, parties will be open. They tend to be more open. And in winter and spring, there will be fewer open parties. There still will be open parties, but a lot of the parties will be closed.
I have to say, looking at my women panelists here, Andy, I'm not sure whether, I don't think we had talked that much about, I talked with all you about Greek and whether you're interested in it, but definitely Callie and Anya, it was a big surprise when you both told me that you had joined sororities. And
well, you were surprised when I ED'd at Northwestern. So you were like pulling for Barnard.
Okay, we'll take that offline. I am thrilled that you are happy at Northwestern, trust me. Andy, tell us about the social life at Case.
So I don't know if I can technically say I'm in a sorority because, before I was like initiated, the whole, pandemic happened, but I rushed and I'm gonna be initiated when we go back. But as Anya said, Greek life is really what you make of it, and especially at Case, Greek life is very centered more around philanthropy and service rather than, more of a party scene. There are parties, but mostly it's centered around service. And the open parties for the frats, you have to make a donation before you go in to support their service, and all the parties are dry, or all the open parties are dry. So it's kind of like they have like a few every semester, like each frat has like a few open parties every semester to raise awareness for their cause or raise money for their philanthropy. But then the rest of them are closed. But I myself am not really, much for partying. That's just my, opinion. But since Case is centered right in the middle of Uptown in Cleveland, there are so many things you can do in the city. And plus, public transportation is free for all Case students. So a lot of people go into downtown Cleveland. There are a lot of like underground concert venues that are super cool. You can see like a lot of bands that you might like for super cheap. Also, there's my friends and I like to go thrift shopping on weekends. And not to mention, Little Italy is right next to the campus, so the eats are very good. So there's a lot of things to do both on and off campus. There's, as Thomas said, you will never find yourself without anything to do on a weekend. So.
Do any of you have first semester recruiting for Greek freshman year, or you're all delayed?
Frats can, sororities can't.
Okay.
I don't really know why.
And John, Duke, when is it? When's
It's in the spring. However, there's a bit of what they call dirty rush, where you kind of have to navigate the social scene and get invited to secret rush events. So there is that pressure to join life from the beginning.
Okay. Let's turn to political vibes on campus. Callie, do you want to talk about it? I mean, this is a question really about, is it a politically engaged student body? And I'm just going to finish the question, because along with that, are all voices heard?
Okay, so I would say it's a very politically engaged university. And it's definitely the kind of place where every day you're going to be kind of learning something new. And that's something that I've really appreciated, where, any class I take or any class that a friend tells me about, or just like walking around on campus, you're going to hear, pressing issues on Brown's campus. And I really appreciate that. Brown kind of has a reputation of being really liberal. And I don't deny that. I mean, it's like kind of accurate. There's definitely, conservative groups and there's nonpartisan political groups, but for the most part, it's a pretty liberal campus. And it's also a campus that is just very passionate, I would say is the right word, where, when there are issues, whether on Brown's campus or, in the administration or outside of the campus, people are going to be talking about it and people are going to be organizing and, making you aware, and I think I've really liked that about the school.
Okay. Thomas, you want to talk about Swarthmore?
Yeah, sure. So like Brown, we're considered to be pretty liberal. And again, I think it's true, right? Like just by the stats, the majority of our campus is liberal. That being said, I think a distinction I want to make that I think is particularly useful at SWAT is that our community, our students are very politically engaged, but I wouldn't call our campus particularly political, in the sense that the only time there's really heavy organizing on campus is for campus related issues. So we've had major on-campus protests, but it's about campus policy. So that's what happened last year when we were pushing for abolishment of the frats. That's also what's happened with a few other issues on campus. Largely divestment is a big one of the campus or of the school's investments. And that's what you see on campus. And I think the rest of the students sort of, if they are passionate about an issue, certainly there are people who talk about it, but they tend to organize events that are off campus. So they tend to go to Philly and be involved in protests in Philly. So I find that I've never found like that I walk somewhere on campus and I feel like, yeah, I'm being like having politics thrown at me, which I think is good because, as a very liberal community. I think if we were too loud about it, right? Like I worry about drowning out other voices, because I think so much of the Swarthmore experience, so much of any college experience is learning about what other people think, regardless of whether or not you agree.
Andy, you want to talk about Case?
Yeah, sure. I would say the majority of the population at Case are very kind of very leaning, sorry, and mostly liberal. As to the question I asked before, is every person heard? I don't think so. I myself, don't always agree with the, with the right, conservative side, but however, a lot of their voices are blocked off on campus, which I do not think is great. But also the Case students in particular are extremely passionate about sustainability. So like there are so many different organizations to get involved in sustainability. Like for example, I'm part of the Humanitarian Design Corps, which works with the farm to like bring solar panel powered fans to the greenhouse. And they even had a competition earlier in the year to see which dorm could like save the most energy. I mean, my dorm lost, but that's okay. And there are just so many incentives to go there. They have student sustainability officers. There's just so many ways, you can get involved. And yeah, but even though a lot of students' voices I feel are not heard on the Case campus, okay, that I guess that disagree with the majority of the population.
Anya or John, do you want to add anything about Northwestern or Duke politically?
If you want. Yeah, I'm gonna add something. So Northwestern, liberal, but so in high school I did not have a single conservative friend. Here at Northwestern, my closest friends freshman year were conservative, and my roommate right now is conservative, and I don't think that like senior year me would never have been like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be living with a conservative. But I think the vibe at Northwestern is generally like, you have your beliefs, I have mine. If we want to engage and discuss, let's do it in a productive manner. Sometimes it does get a little echo chambery, I will say. Sometimes it is a bit, I'm pretty liberal, but sometimes it's a bit too liberal for me. Like, not too liberal, but like the liberal groups are a bit like to drown out other groups. And I have issues with that, but I also in general enjoy how people are very willing to discuss rather than argue.
Well, now we have to hear from Duke.
I would say Duke is not too politically active. I haven't really seen any protests or gatherings on campus for a cause. The reason I think is that I perceive that it's split in many ways, like half liberal, half conservative. I don't know if it's me being in North Carolina. And I'd say if students chose to engage, it would get very hairy very quickly because there's some powerful voices on each side. So I think we choose just not to engage and not to talk about it, and we look to bond or argue over other things. But I think there's some very charged opinions on both sides, far right and far left, so we just kind of ignore it.
Wow, that's all very interesting. Thank you. All right, stereotypes. Every school pretty much has some stereotype. I want to hear what you would say, each of you would say, is the stereotype of the school and the students, and is it accurate? I will start with Callie.
Okay.
Some of this already, but
yeah, I would say the stereotype is pretty crunchy. Free-spirited, freewheeling, liberal. And it's not true. Like, you're definitely gonna meet people who, like, I don't know how to explain this. Yes, there are people that fit the stereotype because that's how a stereotype is perpetuated, I suppose. But, there's also a ton of people who do not fit the stereotype, and, it kind of limits the population of the school to just think about it as that one stereotype, because I know people who are like that, but I know most people are not. So everyone has their own interests, everyone has their own opinions. I think it's more like we have shared values of sort of this kind of streak of independence, I guess. And, sort of like I care so much I'm yelling at you kind of thing, which I think is pretty accurate a lot of the time, but I wouldn't say that it's, that everyone fits into the same mold.
Okay, good, thanks. Thomas.
I think this is a hard question. I don't know. I feel I don't know a lot about the stereotypes of my own school, oddly enough, but I think that probably we would get something like intellectual and very liberal. And I think I already spoke about the political aspect, and I spoke a bit about intellectual sort of tendencies a bit before. But I guess what I will say is that regardless of what you think the stereotype is, I've found that there's a lot of diversity on campus, right? In terms of everything, one of the things that I love most about SWAT is that I can somehow, it's 1,600 people, but I can make a new friend every day still, right? And I can find out like a really interesting, fun fact about just about every single person who I meet. And I think that means that it's hard for anyone to really truly stick only to some stereotype that you have about the students of the school, because like this person did like competitive cheerleading, and like this person is working in like a biology lab reviving worms. You can bring worms back from the dead now, apparently, stem cells. And I think that's just sort of indicative of the whole campus, right? Like everybody is unique in some sense.
Great, thank you. Anya, I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, so I was actually not very familiar with Northwestern before I started my whole application rigmarole. So I'm not super familiar with the stereotypes, but from other Chicago area schools, what I've heard is where nerdy, our parties are average, and we're like sometimes socially awkward. And yeah, it's not inaccurate. Like I will say the nerdiness to them translates to us as being passionate about our interests and about like our area of study. And I think that's something that initially really drew me to Northwestern, is that we're not necessarily here to go and get a job. We're here because we're really interested in what we're majoring in, and we're just here for the sake of learning. And we can have good parties too sometimes. It's not the best. I will say that, but.
How would you know? You said you don't like to go to parties.
I have tried them, and that's how I know.
Okay. Andy.
Yeah, well, Anya, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth too. Case Western, also known for being an extremely nerdy school, full of engineers and pre-med people whose, one goal is to get a job after graduation. And that is true to an extent. However, as Anya said, everyone at Case is just extremely passionate about what they're studying. And, everyone is very academically focused. But I mean, the student body is also extremely diverse in their interests and, what they like to do. I think every single one of the frats has a rock band, and they all play like different events, and everyone just goes out and supports the different, bands around campus. Like the art and music scene is really lively on campus. So, yeah, we're nerds, but I like to think we're cool nerds. I don't know if that's just me making myself feel better, but that's what I like to say.
John, you're the last one on this. Tell us about the stereotype.
you could help me out with what the stereotype is. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I think, everybody knows about the basketball team. I would say I think of Duke as a place where kids are smart and they work hard and they play hard and they love their sports teams and they're really involved in things like Greek life, but they're also, lots of interest. So that's, I think, kind of the stereotype.
I think that was an accurate description from what I've seen.
I nailed it, huh?
Yeah. People really do love their basketball. The teachers won't give an assignment on the night of a big basketball game, some of them. And I think there is the love their sports team, work hard, play hard kind of vibe. I think people do love going out and love having a lot of fun and then waking up the next morning early and working for 12 hours on their assignment. I think there really is a dichotomy, work hard, play hard. I think the stereotype that you advise your students with is pretty accurate.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. We're running out of time, but my last question is really, I almost feel that it's been answered here, but if anybody wants to add to it, it's what prospective students should know about whether this is really the right fit. And as I said, I think much of that has been said, but I'm going to give all of you a minute each to, if there are any last words that you want to share about your school and your experience. I'll start with Andy this time.
Okay, so at Case, I know prospective students should know we have this kind of building called the Sears Think Box, and I feel like that plays a really big part into the students and what they do, and basically what it is they have all these materials and all these tools, like professional engineering tools, and you can have it completely free at your disposal, any major, you don't have to be engineering, and it kind of fosters this more like entrepreneurial spirit, so I feel like if you kind of have a knack for like creativity, but also want to be involved in like STEM, I feel like Case is a great fit. They really, all of my professors have kind of encouraged us to create and to, kind of tinker, It's like, for example, I have a friend who's a theater major, and before her show, she went to ThinkBox and she made her own clothes and buttons to promote her show. And many people have like made startups right in that very building. So I feel like if you are very passionate about what you want to major in and you have this kind of creative spirit and you want to kind of apply your major to like a more philanthropic service, I guess, when you're at school, Case is a great fit for you.
Great. John.
Yeah, so I'd say that Duke does have a vibe from even the academic to the social. It's definitely a sporty vibe. I know people who like playing sports or talking about the statistics or the history, but a lot of them are in some way involved with sports. And I can't stress enough, the highlight of Duke for me is how accessible and how personable the professors are. I have a friend who had a startup idea and went to a professor, and now they have weekly meetings, and it was so easy to do so. Or I needed advice with which classes to take, and I talked to 3 professors the day that I had the problem because they were all happy to sit with me in their office. And that's really just been the highlight. There's professors ready to help you. There's TA office hours constantly, all times. And so the support academically is really strong. And I also think the Duke freshman experience is a unique one and really exemplary. They do a great job. Me being part of that program, I saw a lot of nervous freshmen really come to their own and have lots of resources. And I think those are the two or three big things.
Terrific. Callie.
Something I would say is that it's not a very pre-professional school. There's definitely people that are, looking to take classes based on jobs and that sort of thing. But for the most part, even people who are pre-professional, they're taking classes and they're exploring their interests because they genuinely care about what they're doing and what they're learning. And I think that's something that is a big through line for the whole school, that there's just this sense of, empathy for other people's ideas and thoughts, and everyone wants to hear what you're doing and what you have to say, and everyone wants to help. And, and then there's this sense that like everyone kind of has this, like artsy laid back side, again, the stereotype. But everyone also has this deep passion for what they're doing, and everyone has these sort of hidden depths where, they have this really interesting extracurricular or, thing that they do outside of school that you would never imagine. And I think that it has been a big part of the Brown experience, is like really diving deep into your interests. And I think that's also where the open curriculum comes in. So one, I would say you have to be comfortable being independent and figuring out what the heck you're going to take. And two, you have to let it, you can take whatever you want. So it's okay to kind of take weird classes. I've taken many, many weird classes, and just figure out what your interests are, and then, dive deep into it.
Okay. Thomas, making my way to my seniors now.
Yeah. I think to start with, a really great benefit that I don't think I've talked much about is because we're a small school, and in particular because we're not a research university, we attract teachers, right? Like people who apply for a job know that what they're going to do is teach a full load, basically, right? And that's the majority of what my professors are doing. And I think what that makes is, for a classroom that feels like it's being led by someone who knows what they're doing, right? Like, I think one of the biggest problems with academia and with like higher education as a whole is that you just have to have a PhD to teach. A PhD doesn't make you a good teacher. But I would comfortably say I've had 2 bad teachers in 3 years. And I think that's not something that you get at a lot of other schools. That being said, the trade-off there is that if you want to do research, you have to be a go-getter. So if you're the kind of person who knows going in that you are really invested in lab work, let's say, you need to be conscious of that. And I think, honestly, you can absolutely do it because we prepare you for it, and we have resources with like the career services and within the departments that will point you in that direction. But sort of, I think the thing about Swarthmore in general is you will get a good education if you just come, but you won't get anything more than you would get at any other school. I think what makes us different is that there are all of these opportunities, and your job as a student is to claim them, to go out there and find the thing that interests you and pursue it, right? And people will help you, but you have to be that first step. That's up to you. You have to instigate it. So I think come if you want an education, but you're also driven. You want to make opportunities for yourself, claim those opportunities for yourself.
Thanks. Anya, and then I have one more question for everybody.
Yeah, so Northwestern is, I think, a super collaborative environment, and overall, most of the people I've met, whether they're students, faculty, or staff, are there to support you and help you. And even when you're in a class that's curved with other students, like, they will stay up until like 2 a.m. helping you study. Like, it's a team sport around here. And that's something I've really enjoyed and I really appreciate about being here. It's not cutthroat, it's not competitive, but it's still, everyone's still ambitious at the same time. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. We have a question that I just want to pose to you, and you're all going to get 20 seconds to answer it. The question is, where are you all from, and has the adjustment then moving away been, how has that been? And I will answer the first part of the question with, you're all from the New York metropolitan area, and most of you are from Westchester County. We have one Connecticut. There she is. And but Anya, well, actually we've got Illinois and Ohio and North Carolina, and Callie and Thomas are within driving distance. But how would you, I'll start with you, John. Any adjustment being
There wasn't much adjustment for me because a lot of my friends that I have now are actually from the Northeast and people I could drive to see from Westchester if I wanted to. So I didn't. The social environment was pretty similar to one that I've had here, so there wasn't much adjustment.
Mhm. Andy?
Well, I'm from a very small town in Connecticut. So while the adjustment was big, it was a welcome one. Just because Cleveland, while a lot of people don't think so, I think it's a great city with a lot of things to do. And like I always find myself having, like a ton of fun, taking advantage of the urban environment. So it was a very welcome adjustment. It honestly was not as bad as I thought it was going to be either. It was a good adjustment, I'd say.
I'm going to just close with Anya because as I said, you're the one who traveled among the furthest. So.
Yeah, I was ready to get out of Westchester, but I ended up just moving to the Westchester of Illinois. So, yeah. So it sort of has the comforts of home, in addition to being a new place with new people. I wasn't worried about the adjustment too much going in, and I think I personally didn't really have issues adjusting. I will say that I miss New York pizza a lot, and Chicago pizza is not as good.
Okay. I shouldn't just assume that Callie and Thomas have nothing to say on this, but I just said because you're in driving distance. If there's anything you want to add, please do.
Well, I did not want to fly. I wanted to drive, so that was part of, my college search. So I really liked I feel like it's a good distance because, it's close enough to drive, but it's not close enough where I would, feel like an impulse or an ability really to go home every weekend. So I feel like it's been a really good distance for me. Adjusting, it wasn't that difficult. I don't know. I feel like I was also pretty lucky because some of my closest friends I met like the first day of school who lived on the same floor as me, and that made it a lot easier. But yeah, I also feel like my high school was pretty decently sized, and so I wasn't really overwhelmed in that sense in terms of the number of people. And also, as I've gotten older, the campus feels a lot smaller, just in terms of the amount of people I know and the places that I've been around. It definitely feels smaller almost immediately.
Thomas, we'll close on your remarks.
Yeah, I think I'm also pretty close. I think I will say that, so I've lived in the same house, in the same town, went to the same school with the same people for my entire life. So I think there was an adjustment there. I don't think it has to do with what school I went to or where I went to. I think there's always going to be some amount of adjustment, right? When you just need to get used to being apart from people who maybe you've known for like 13 years, right? That being said, I felt really comfortable on campus day one, right? I actually met some of my current best friends during admitted student events. So I already knew people on day one. And I think that's not where the issue will be. Just, it takes time to adjust to anything in life. And I'm happier for it. So embrace it.
Good parting words. Embrace it. And I want to thank my 5 fabulous panelists. You guys are great. I am so appreciative, and I think you were able to share some really thoughtful and insightful things about your colleges and your own experiences. And I hope that our listeners feel the same. I'm sure they do. So I'm going to say goodnight to everyone, and thank you to all my panelists and the participants, and be well, be safe, be healthy. Good night.